And I still haven't figured out how to record directly to YouTube or Google Drive, so we'll just have to do it manually. Anyway, yeah, okay. 23rd of November, plan weekly meeting. Did I have the first thing? Yeah, okay. So yeah, I guess this is not, I've forgotten what I've written. So yeah, plan will hire 3 front-end team members in Q4. I think this is quite advanced already with at least 2 of these positions, but we'll open a third one and optimize. If you know anybody, I've linked the procedure for referring somebody. It's always good to refer people, even if we don't have an open role at the time. So you're very welcome to refer anybody. Anyway, on to demos. Donald, you're next.
Cool. Okay, so I wanted to start giving updates to where we are as a team as far as the OKR as a feature. I don't know. What's the official name of the OKR project, not OKRs, which we'll be talking to as a team, talking about as a team
OKR
later on.
management.
But anyway, OKR management.
That's what I've been saying,
Amanda?
OKR management. And it follows the other patterns of design management and all the requirements management.
Cool, that makes sense. Okay, so I wanted to give an update where we are as a team as far as OKR management. I don't believe Slack is, no. Okay, and also demo for the folks that missed last week or wasn't able to catch the video. We had a pretty good demo around where we are at, and we've added, I think, a little bit more since last week. So I was going to demo it, but Kushal actually added a decent amount of stuff that product planning is doing. So, and I think you mentioned that you were going to demo. So, do you want to demo, or you want me to?
Yeah, so I can demo it directly on the project that I created on GitLab.com itself, and I got the feature flag enabled as well. So I'll first summarize the very first point from the agenda. So basically, we started out as basically creating objectives from the issues list. Both backend and front-end support got added within 15.6 itself. The idea was to basically create an action next to new issue button on the issues list, where user can select new objective and then they can create objective right from the issues list page. Initially, they just need to provide issue title, the objective title, and then it gets created and shows up within the issues list. So I'm going to go ahead and just a second, I'm going to share my screen and
also, just an FYI, I added it to or I turned it on for one of the projects within the plan stage group, because I don't think everyone has access to the to that other test project. I don't think that shouldn't cause any issues, right? Because I know the plan was to just turn it on for one project in the future, but I don't think there'd be any issues with turning it on for multiple projects.
Yeah, so I checked a bunch of team members who are working on this feature, but yeah, in case you do not have access to the project, just leave your name in the agenda document and I'll add it right away after I complete my demo. Yeah, so you should be able to see my screen and the project here. So it's basically a GitLab OKRs under issue reproduce. And what you need to do is go to issues list. And you would notice that in the header section, new issue button is now a split drop down button. So when you click on this drop down, select new objective, and then you click on new objective, it asks you to provide the objective title. So we can just set objective title, and then we click on create objective, and it basically creates in place and updates the list. And now you see that objective is created here. There are a bunch of things missing here, like this icon is still pointing to the issue icon and not the objective icon. So we need to update that. When you click on objective, it takes you to the typical work items page. And on the work item page, you would notice like it has a bunch of other details like the title, assignees, status, labels, etc. Now, Donald, you want to go ahead and present the second and third item, or should I finish the hierarchy? Because then it would include all the things from the demo.
Yeah, just jump to the hierarchy.
Okay, so skip directly to the fourth point. So the next feature set from the product planning team was to basically introduce hierarchy widget on the work items page, which is this particular widget that you see here. So we added the front end support for basically having this drop down button, which shows bunch of actions. We are using the same shell that we used for task lists in the issues. So when you click on this drop down button, it shows bunch of actions like new objective, new key result, and then existing objective and existing key result. Currently, when you click on this, it shows the form, but it won't allow you to create an objective inside of an objective because we are still waiting for a couple of backend MRs and the front end MR that depends on the backend. All those MRs are in draft. But the idea is that you should be able to create a key result or an objective inside of an objective, or you can add an existing objective as a child item. So as you can see that if I go back to this issues list, we have two objectives here, this testing objectives and then objective title. So if I want to add an existing objective, I can just click on this drop down action, which says existing objective. And then the moment I click here, it auto completes all the existing objectives. I can search by title if I want to. So currently searching only by title is supported. So you can basically click on the suggested item. And when you click on add objective, it will basically add the item here and will show the tree view. Now, speaking of tree view, so the design for the tree view was supposed to be the same as the one that we see today in the epics page, where you can basically attach child epics and issues within an epic. We are using the same design, but we are not quite using the same tree app because the current tree implementation on the epics page is using Vuex heavily. And at the same time, it is also reliant on the REST APIs. But since work items is all Vue Apollo, we didn't want to basically change the tree app to a point where it becomes unmaintainable. So we decided to reuse the shell that we created for task list. And we are using some of the templates and logic from the tree app to recreate the tree UI within this widget. So that's the plan for now. As far as next week's goals are concerned, we want the tree view to be functional. So Jan has already created a POC MR, which adds support for creating objectives and key results within an objective. And Flory is using that POC backend as a foundation to test the front end. So once we have the tree ready, that MR will get merged most likely early next week, which means that next week's plan weekly, I think it would be APAC, where we get to demo the tree view. So that is about both the features that we did. First one was creating objectives from issues list, and the fourth one was hierarchy widget itself. So, yep. Any questions?
I have a quick question, Kushal. Just a confirmation, maybe. I noticed that when you interact with the split drop-down button, and you went down and you selected objective.
Yes.
Objective then took the place up in the button, and you had to press the button again.
Yes.
Is that the normal pattern for a split drop-down versus saying hitting the drop down?
Yes.
And when the action is actually triggered when you select objective?
Yeah. So that's a common pattern for all similar split drop downs that you would notice across GitLab. It's a 2-click process, unfortunately, for now. But since we are working towards MVC that is due in January, so we are dealing with this. Earlier, we thought of other ideas like having new objective button right next to the new issue button, just like this edit issues, but then it would have cluttered the entire actions area with bunch of buttons that user may not want to see. So we are dealing with this 2-click process. Also, this feature is going to be internal for a while before we make it generally available, which means that we will iron out all these usability issues like having multiple click paths to reach to the creation of objective. So, yep.
Yep, as long as that's the common interaction pattern for the drop-down button, that sort of 2-click or maybe even 3-click interaction. I totally get the visual clutter thing too, right? That area is got a ton of buttons already, and so not adding to it is great. As long as that's the common pattern and it's accepted everywhere else, then I'm cool. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yep. So Amanda has mentioned a question here, and it was basically based from design discussion. So right now, we don't have the tree. As you can see that we just have an empty widget. But once tree items show up here, user will be able to click on those individual items, and that would basically open a model dialog. And then that would show all the details similar to what this page shows. So if you look at the issues list where we support task list, you can click on individual tasks and it shows the work item UI within the model dialog. We want to replicate that same behavior here as well, that a root objective can be shown in its own dedicated page. But once you are inside that root objective, you should be able to click on individual items and that should open a pop-up. And you should be able to basically drill down all the way till last item from that tree while remaining on the same model dialog. So Amanda's question is more directed towards Donald, you and myself, that who are going to take care of that navigation from the model dialog perspective. Like once tree items show up here, those items need to be clickable. And once user clicks on them, it needs to open a model dialog with the work item UI, much like this page within the dialog itself.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting because what if it's not really a use case for OKRs, but it will be in the future for when we have more than one child or more than one level of children. So
yeah,
once we have grandchildren, are we going to, especially when we're talking about modals and modals, are we replacing the modal? I know other project management tools do sidebars where they go sidebars and sidebars and sidebars.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've.
Donald, I think that
Sorry.
we need it for OKRs because objectives can be nested 9 levels deep under each other objective.
Yeah, it is definitely
exploring that. I'll link the issue. Sorry to interrupt you, Amanda. You go ahead.
No worries. I linked the issue already in the design discussion in number 6. So for OKRs, we already made the decision for the MVC to just replace the child. So you're on an objective, you click the first child, you get the pop-up, I'm using bad terms, sorry. And then you're viewing a child of the first parent and you select a next child or a grandchild that replaces the pop-up with the grandchild's pop-up. That's the behavior we're going to take for MVC. But in the future, we do want to explore potentially using the drawers and something maybe a little bit that provides information about the prior parents. Does that make sense?
Also, by the way,
we all
add to that, Nick is also involved in sort of how that works in general as a work item. So that is definitely being thought out right now, and we're actually making some good headway. I think some very logical headway on that.
Yeah, so there's other implications too, outside of just the just deciding what to do with the modal in like the URL. If we're showing multiple descendant key results or objectives, how are we showing that in the URLs and the breadcrumbs?
Yeah, and Alexis has that in her design. I'm pretty sure it's in that design issue. I know that she started thinking about, okay, well, what do we do with the URL as we're popping each of these different levels? So definitely contribute to how you would like to see that. I'm not opinionated in what the URL should be, but I do want to bias for making a decision moving forward. So my first question, or my basic question, is who's going to own the actual creation of that child?
So I think product planning has been doing most of the work around hierarchy. And I think that one is tied more towards the hierarchy side of things, but project management and the work that Natalia is doing around around switching it from IDs to IDs that she's going to demo later on is on the project management side. So I think it'll be a collaboration, but the DRI for any of the hierarchy stuff, I think, should be on the product planning side. If you are all right with that.
I have no problem with it. Kushal, do you have any concern, especially as it relates to timeline?
Only concern would be the front-end capacity within the team, because
Right.
Flori is currently working on getting the tree view ready. She won't be available starting next week all the way till first week of January, which means that this model would need to be developed in collaboration with someone from project management anyway.
Okay. I wonder if we could also consider asking Abhilash to help. I don't know if he has front-end experience, but I think he's looking for more MVC work.
Yeah, so Abhilash is currently taking care of the progress bar stuff. So he'll be working on getting the back end and front end of progress input widget. But at the same time, model dialog related changes are not simple as well, at least not on the surface. And I would rather have someone who has greater awareness of the front end of work items be doing these changes, because otherwise we would need to do a lot of hand holding with regards to implementation.
Yeah, we can figure out the details around there. Worst case, if we don't have the band, like there's workarounds we can do on the UI side to get a first MVC out. Like we can push off on some of the decisions around like the URL and the breadcrumbs if we just don't have the bandwidth on the front end. So we'll work together. I think probably all the teams, all the groups will work together on figuring out the distribution of front end effort on everything hierarchy related. Okay,
it's
real quick,
related
I'm
to
going to
the
demo.
related to what you mentioned about the URL. When you open a modal currently with a task in it, is that does that appear in the URL? Because well, my main question is, like, if we do this hierarchy thing where the modal actually changes, I think as long as the back button works, it's probably not a big issue for the first iteration. But if it doesn't work, it kind of is, right? Because you can't get back. There's no way back to where you came from.
So when you open a task list item in the model dialog, it updates the URL, but it basically adds work item ID as a query param, which means that someone can copy that URL, and then when they navigate that URL, it will open the base issue first, and then it will also open the model dialog.
Cool. So that's presumably stored in the history as well. So, you know, if you hit back in the browser, it would close the modal, right?
Yes, it will close the model, but it will also reload the page because this is not handled by view router. It's basically a page refresh. Quite a fast one, but visible. I will also demo this so we can dive into this on the demo of IID.
Cool. Thank you.
I don't know how to use a Zoom on my not just my laptop. Okay, I'm not muted. Good. All right, I'm just running through Alexandra's question around the filter list. And we can also test the back button here in non-modal view. Okay, so I just created an objective. It shows up in the list here. And then his question was if we filter it by label, do we see it? And yes, we do. And Alexandra, I know you have connectivity issues, so I'm not sure if you're still there, but does that answer your question?
Hear me? I'm
Yep.
not sure if my sound will be okay, but my question is, like, if you now create an objective, would you need to remove the filtering in order to see that new objective? So if you were now to create one object, no, just leave on the filtering.
Oh, I got what you're saying. Yeah, no, it showed up on the list after. It looks like we're doing a hard refresh after this.
But you need to have the filtering on the search bar. So like you have a filter, you create an objective. Now you need to remove the filtering in order to see the
I got what you're saying. Let's see. Yeah, it should show up. All right, let's cancel and start from scratch. All right, new objective, another objective. Yeah.
Can you add a label filter now? Let's add a label filter, whatever label filter you have.
So you won't. I got what you're saying. Yeah, so you won't see it here.
Yeah. Okay. So
We
now
don't
you
do
create an
issue.
objective.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about similar workflow that we have on boards. When you create an issue within a list, we will add the labels and everything from that list to the issue, which
I don't think that happens
probably
for
makes sense.
Yeah.
No, but we don't really have a inline issue creation experience on a list view. I don't think anymore. Yeah. So I think it'd probably be something we want to add maybe down the road, is that ability. But then it'll be interesting to think through what we do for widgets that don't, for differences in widget or filtering for the different work item types. So yeah, just something we should definitely think about in the future. I did notice, actually, I wonder if we refresh here. Okay, it does go back to a new issue. That's another thing that we might want to think through too, because I think where we use the drop down in other places, it defaults to the last your last selection. It's like on the group issue list view, if you change it to select a project, the next time you go to that list view, it defaults to the project that you last selected. It's like right now, if my main job is to create a bunch of objectives and I come in here and I want to create something from here, I'm probably going to want to create an objective and not an issue. And
so I tested group issues list and it doesn't preserve the last selected project.
Oh, it doesn't?
Nope.
It used to, I thought.
At least after reload, it didn't preserve.
Interesting. Okay, maybe it never did.
Yeah.
I must be imagining that. I thought we had that like saved in local storage before. Yeah, it just defaults back to the other one. All right, never mind. Nice to have globally then in the future. Okay, I think that's all I had, or that's all we had to demo as far as OKRs. The other stuff that I added can probably be read only unless there are any questions. But I just listed out kind of the top level or the high level issues and epics that we've kind of committed to getting done before the January rollout. So that would be for a 2, which is around the system notes. Quick kind of summary of the work that's been done there is Alexandru's got a backend MR for that is in review, and that moves or that gives us the ability to grab all notes from GraphQL and to filter those notes by either system notes or all discussions and notes. There's good progress on the review there, so we're hoping to get that in the next few days. The front end, there's an MR. It looks like I forgot to link there. I'll add the link to it. but that Deepika is working on that has the backend for that notes query that I was just talking about mocked. But I think we can go ahead and use the actual either Alexandria's branch or just go ahead and or just wait for it to get to master and start building off of the actual backend. So we're hoping to get something previewable, even if it's just showing the system notes within a work item unstyled. Hoping to get at least to that point by next week. And then 4A3 is very much related to that, in it's more around discussions and notes. The backend MR for system notes is like I said, that includes the discussions and notes also. So we should be able to, after that's merged in, get the discussions, and we may be able to also get that viewable within work items, again, not styled and without the ability to add discussions or edit discussions through a work item yet. That'll be the next iteration, so in the next couple weeks. And then where are we at? I think all that's left is 6 and 7. Milestones is globally, because we're adding that to tasks also. That is both the front end and back end is done there and ready to be tested. It's in work items MVC2, which means it's available for all of the plan stage group. So please test there. Once we're comfortable with moving it forward, we'll move it to, probably along with iterations, over to the next feature flag, which would mean it would be available in GitLab org and GitLab com. And then last one is labels, is already, of course, available on work items. Questions, comments on anything OKR management related? Okay, I'll take the silence as no more questions. So let's move on to Natalia's demo.
Okay, let me quickly share my screen. And Amanda is right. Right now, back button, it works for me in some cases, but it's not working consistently. So I assume it depends on your history in the browser. So we will need to look into this. But let's see the IID at least. So hope you can see my desktop now. And here is how do we fetch work item standalone one. And right now we're fetching it by ID. 2 here is a global ID, which means it's GID whatever 2 work item. And this work item, currently we do a check if this work item belongs to the current project, but this is still the ID that has nothing to do with Flight.js. It can be a completely separate part of the instance. However, if we enable the feature flag and use this parameter in the URL, you can see we're fetching a completely different work item. This is relative to the project, and it's the work item with IID2. The same applies to tasks. Right now, if I open the task, you can see the work item ID is 575, and even judging by number, you can tell that this is a global ID. We rarely see the project with so many issues. If we enable the feature flag and use the same parameter, let's refresh, we're getting the same work item, but you can see this IID here is different. For now, we just have a feature flag, and you cannot test this in production because it's defaulted to false. But even if we enable it globally, we will still be able to be flexible between the two using the IID path URL parameter. wonder if I click back right now. Well, this works, but it doesn't close because I just tried to fix it with replace history. So we will need to dive a bit deeper into this on the back button, but it's definitely doable. And while we're here, I just demo one more little thing super fast, because I've been just diving into this afternoon. So you can see this is our typical issue list. And normally when I refresh the page, there is a GraphQL call happening and getting you the new issue list. However, you can see this one is cached. There is no GraphQL request and it was quite fast. If we go to labels, that was a slow one. You can see that they are not fetched. There is this little blink moment that requires for Vue to render all the labels. And if I go with Forerunner, I tested it previously. You can see that there is no loading as well. It just shows us the cached results. If I want to play around it and go with label, right now it's not, it decided not to work because it's a demo. So let's refresh it again. So if I remove runner and go with the label, let's say mfunc, there is a loading state. And we load. Right now it's cached too. So if I refresh the page now, it will be cached. There will be no refetch. I still need to figure out how to refetch and update the cache nicely without showing the loading state to user. But it's a nice progress, I think, for just half of the working day on caching. Any questions on any of those issues?
Yes, one question. The caching looks awesome. I don't want to just breeze past that huge achievement and go straight to the previous thing you talked about. But so that I have this straight, like at some point we'll default the other way so that the new work item IID is used, and you'll need to use the switch to use the old version. Is that right? And then we'll remove it completely.
I am not sure that we want to remove completely searching by the global ID, because I can see that we probably will have cases where we want to fetch by global ID. So for example, right now we're within the same project, we're using the same issues here, the same workspace, right? But imagine that we have a sidebar where we just do an explorer and we want to show the work item from completely different one, maybe related, maybe not. So I don't know if we're going to remove ID completely. We can default to some, and we can have a second option. So the most used option will be probably just shown with the default one. And the second one, we will need to use a URL parameter. So the less usable one will need to require any kind of URL parameter, but I wouldn't get rid of any of them, at least for now.
And
this we discussed before. I was just going to say, do you think maybe in the future, I mean, we discussed about having another route for work items that use a global ID. I mean, that way we could use that one, but I do think it makes sense that at some point, the one that is scoped to a project stops using the global ID and the validation you do on the front end.
Amanda, would you like to vocalize your question?
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm sorry, I don't know this, but do we already have a work items API? And if so, how are we allowing querying? Like which ID are we using and which one are we returning?
So yes, we do have work items API. It's a GraphQL one. And currently we have both options. We can query by the global ID of the work item if we want, and we can query by the IID. Both of them are returned in the response. So you can see the global ID and the IID of every single work item that we have on the page.
But presumably you don't need the group or project scope if you're using the
global, yeah.
ID.
You have the global query for work item if you fetch in by ID. Similarly, like you can fetch an issue just by ID, by a global one, without referencing the project.
Okay, final question. Will we be overloading URLs then? So URLs that previously included the global ID will in future use the IID. I don't know the name for it. The IID that's scoped to the project. Like so somebody could have a bookmarked a URL, right, in the past, and when they revisit that URL, there could be a collision with another work item, and they see that instead?
So currently they won't, because for fetching the work item by IID, they will require the URL parameter. So if you visit work item 2 right now, it will be always a work item with a global ID 2. And to fetch by IID, you would need to add the URL parameter so we can have this differentiation. We can think about the migration path from 1 to the 2nd and see how often users are fetching by the global ID, for example.
Cool, thanks.
My concern would be on like 2 different IDs for the same work item. In some places you display one ID, in other places you display the internal ID or whatnot. So then, like, users usually try to communicate through these IDs, like verbally, for instance. So then it becomes confusing when you're referring to you'd not, a lot of the times you'd not say IID 89, you just say, well, see that issue with ID 89. Did he mean the actual ID or the IID or so that's kind of.
But this problem is not unique for work items. We have in other entities where we use global ID and where we have IID. So it needs to be resolved on the higher level than just the work item.
But I think it's a good point. And we have, to your point, we have that problem in other places, inconsistencies. When a particular issue is being worked, the engineer makes a decision as to which one to pick, right? So I would love it if we make a decision for ourselves in terms of defining which one we want to show in certain views and document that in the blueprint documents. And that way, when an engineer gets an issue, they don't have to make the decision. They can go to the blueprint document, see the guidance, and we move forward. And eventually, if we want to migrate from one to the other, that's fine. But at least it's well defined and documented what we're using where.
I think eventually we will need to make a clear separation that when we use a URL without the project path, so global, work items, a number, we will use a global ID. If we use a project path or group path, we should be fetching by IID. But yeah, we will need to reflect this in the blueprint. Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, though, what you just how you just explained that, Natalia, in that the requirement should be that if it's at the root level or at the instance level, or I don't know, when we get namespaces, maybe the namespace level, like we show the ID. Everywhere else we use the IID. It'll be interesting when we get to like yeah, related but on context work items, where we have, like, even for like the issue list, where we plan on showing a work item in that view in a modal. What do we add to the URL there? Will that just be a query? I'm assuming, yeah, it'll just be a query param, and then we'll have to decide if we want to use, yeah, there's just more. I think we need to talk through this a little bit more with UX, because it does have, there are a lot of implications on the URLs and what we're kind of showing to the end users there.
Yeah, I think the biggest confusion is on the UI part. Like on the back end, we do want to use the global IDs because it's easier to get to the item. You don't need to pass as much data in order to get the item. But on the front end, it's very confusing when in a list you see a lot of the items with the same ID, right? Or you use different IDs, like the global ID, or you use a number that doesn't make any sense in regard to how many issues you have in a way. So then maybe we need to make like separate decision in the UI. We always use IIDs or something like that. And that's not necessarily has to do with what we use as params URLs. Maybe it's a discussion definitely to be had, because like on the list you want to see where that issue is coming from. Is it coming from this project or this other hierarchy? Where is it coming from?
I think that that EID is important also on backend part, because I wonder if and how it would work when we use global ID in URL, because now I'm used to copy paste URL in comments when referencing other issues, and I wonder how it would work if there would be some place where we show global ID instead of internal ID, because our referencing system wouldn't work with this global ID URL, I assume. Would it?
It depends. I think the renderer actually fetches the item and then you create that HTML rendered within the database. So like, I think it's doable. Should not make a difference. It depends on the URL. If we can resolve the item itself, then you can create the cached HTML and display the same way as we do display now.
Well, it depends what we expect, because I would expect that if I refer to some other work item, then it's some kind of stable reference. So even if I do backup of the project and migrate it to some other GitLab instance, then the reference still remains. Yeah, so I still refer to the other issue. But if there is a global ID, this will be broken because global IDs are not persistent. So any presence of global ID wouldn't work when you import, export, or migrate your project somewhere else. So that's one of the reasons why we should avoid having global IDs in URLs or in references in general. So I was curious how it would work.
Yeah, like if you put #123 in a discussion, is that going to show the project 123 IID or the 123 global ID?
Yeah, so if you put 123, I would expect that at least on backend side, we will assume that this is in EEID and not global ID, and we will treat it as this. Yeah.
Okay, I want to move on to Natalia. I like how you just dropped the little demo as an afterthought, but that's a huge deal as part of the Snappy GL project around caching it, and just that instant rendering of the issue list is it's amazing. So that's super exciting demo also. All right, Alexandru, read only. I think your connection's been fine, but you just mentioned the discussion on the work items widget, DB table structure. So if you are interested in hearing more about that or contributing to that discussion, please do so in that issue. Workflow, Yarka is not available, but she was proposing a planned meeting time change. Left a couple options there. Do y'all want to discuss changing the time, or you just want to discuss it in the agenda? I don't know how we want to do
that. If we went an hour earlier, would that would be pretty difficult for any US team members to attend, right?
Maybe a survey to send to the entire team with a couple options, and then we can see where we land, and then maybe we can split it into 2 meetings or something like that.
I think an hour earlier, at least for Nick and Alexis, would be at like 6 in the morning.
It would be
You're
at
there.
7:30 in the morning for them.
Yeah, they're central. It would be 7:30 for me as well. But I think there was also a suggestion of an hour later. Why don't we just stick it in an issue and let people vote with emojis or something?
Sounds good.
I would love to keep it as one meeting if possible. You lose so much when you break it into two. But
Yeah, and we already do every other week APAC as well, and we could fragment this into lots of different times of meetings. All right, and maybe Arca will be DRI for this, but I'll take it in the meantime and open an issue for a vote. I have the next
You're
one
up
as well.
next then, John.
Right. Oh, this is a big one. Okay, so maybe instead, since we only have 3 minutes left, I wanted to maybe just run through some of the OKRs that I was hoping we could accomplish as a stage in Q4. We're already 3 weeks into Q4 standard. Yeah, maybe instead we can take them forward to like next week, and they're here for anyone who wants to like read them and give me any feedback on them. If you want to get involved in them as an individual, you're very welcome as well. Obviously, the big target is to get objectives and key results done. We should call it objectives management, right? Done in Q4. This is the engineering OKR for that. I presume product have an OKR on their side as well. There's also, in case it's news to anybody, we will onboard 3 contractors on product planning for this effort. And there's also a single engineer group, Avalash, if you haven't met him already. I think he attended last week's APAC meeting. Yeah, it is a project and not an OKR. On the other hand, like we have a lot of things that like we can accomplish that kind of make it like OKR, like from the engineering perspective, including like most of this is process related, like making sure that we have a backlog that's appropriate for contractors, making sure we have a plan and how we're going to help them be like onboard quickly, be productive, and so on. And then the other KRs, like the bottom one is like just barely also an OKR, but just something we have to do. Like I think doing annual talent assessment isn't something you can do to like 70%. You have to do it 100%. So it's not really an OKR. But the other 2 are things that anyone can get involved in, I think. So yeah, take a look at them. I have an issue there for the second one, which is like it has irritated me for a while. Not irritated me, but it's bothered me for a while that it feels like we should be the team that push up more updates to GitLab's product development flow, given that we're the plan stage. And I think we could be doing more of that, and we get the benefit that our features that we're building are being used by our colleagues. So there's an open issue there, and of course I'm taking ideas for that as well. And then we have the performance enhancements, the tip of the iceberg of which was Natalia's demo earlier. But just think what we could accomplish, right? Cool. So anyway, give it a look, and yeah, you can feedback to me directly or take it forward even into next week, or we can check in on them each week, whatever works for people. Alexander?
Yeah, on the user autocomplete suggestions, like I don't know if that's something we can work as much on because it ties so much into authorization with the memberships and group sharing, and that all ties into how you can autocomplete from a specific issue or a specific comment or MR or stuff like that. I've opened an issue to kind of audit those endpoints, and I did look into that. I didn't do too much progress because of stuff, but yeah, it's very much tied into how we want to handle memberships overall. I'm not saying we should not contribute to that, but I'm not sure we can do a lot in like a lot of progress without really changing or contributing to memberships.
Yeah, but I think if you look at the pattern of usage that people have, they tend to spend time in a small number of projects. And if you look at what this endpoint actually returns, it's like participants in the current issue, author in the current issue, all of the members of the groups that you have access to, plus members of the groups of that project. So for a given project, like it's incredibly static. It's also like very fast on the back end, I guess, in some cases. And all we're asking in this quarter, like, would be like the goal would be to move this into GraphQL. That's it. It's currently in REST. If we move it into GraphQL, it can be used in multiple parts of the page. It's currently used in the sidebar and it's used in the comment field, but those two things return a different set of users, which is like, without getting too far into it, like you can't currently assign a community contributor to an issue using the assignee widget in the sidebar, but you can do it using the comment box and the quick action. So it's things like that we're looking to fix. Like, it's not really a back end issue anymore, like that we're not looking to make it faster on the back end, but simply like cache it on the front end and optimistically render that list of users in the same way as Natalia demonstrated earlier with the issues list. Like, we render it first and then we update it in the background when the request completes. So the experience for the user is they're not waiting around to get an instant list of users from their cache on the front end, which is then clarified and updated, a second or so later. But instead of waiting a second for the list, they get it instantly. And that's the performance benefit.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with moving it to GraphQL. What I'm trying to say is that there is like, which one do you move, right? Because you have, like you said, you have one list of users within the assignee drop down, and then you have a different list of users within the auto completion. So which one do we want to move to GraphQL, or do we want to move, even though we know they're broken, right? Do we want to move all of them to GraphQL? Just because this is where, like, I think there is a more base question that we want to figure out how to solve, or let's decide on one that we want to move to GraphQL. If so, that's what I'm trying to get to.
I think the comment one, the one that appears in the quick action, is the one we want everywhere, right?
Cool.
I have an issue for this. I'll dig it out. Anyway, we're over time. But Blair, you had the last point.
Real quick then, just going over usability benchmarking with Melissa and Danica. We realize that our JTBDs across the plan stage are, for lack of a better term, bad. They're really wordy and hard to understand and hard to action on, and not at all consistent across the entire plan stage for our users. So just a heads up, we will be taking a look and probably rewriting them. I have mentioned Dan Mizzi-Harris from Certify, sort of taking the lead on that from the UX point side, and then also getting our glorious tech writer Marcin involved in making those as actionable and less wordy as possible. Done. So just a heads up.
Awesome. Thanks. That about wraps it up for today, I think. Thanks, everyone.